Bill Gates said it was just a few dinners. So what do Taliban negotiations, confidential field intelligence, CIA drone strike analysis, a $2.5 million Gates Foundation grant, offshore vaccine vehicles, and pandemic insurance triggers all have in common? The same relationship Gates and Epstein maintained for at least 5 years. So let's take a look at the documents, because this isn't just hearsay, it's architecture. Most people think the Gates-Epstein relationship was about flights, social proximity, and reputational regret. Yet that isn't what the Department of Justice Epstein files show. What they show is a sustained operational channel between 2013 and at least 2018, involving Gates' senior advisor, the International Peace Institute, confidential polio security intelligence, a multi-million-dollar foundation grant, and pandemic financial structuring. In 2013, polio eradication efforts in Pakistan were operating inside active conflict zones. Vaccination workers were being shot, bombed, and kidnapped. This wasn't simply public health logistics. It required political negotiation and security intelligence. The Gates Foundation funded the International Peace Institute, a UN-adjacent think tank led by Norwegian diplomat Terje Rod Larsen, to help navigate that environment. In March 2013, Boris Nikolic, Bill Gates' chief science advisor at his private office, emailed Jeffrey Epstein. The subject line was polio, update, specific asks. Epstein replied, "I'm on it." Within days, confidential field intelligence began flowing. Not to a government agency, but to Epstein's private Gmail account. Between 2013 and 2015, Rod Larsen forwarded at least 10 sets of sensitive reports to Epstein. These included Taliban positioning, drone strike impact analysis, Pakistan military assessments, security briefings prepared for meetings involving Bill Gates. One document was marked confidential, do not circulate. Instead of going directly to Bill Gates, it was routed through Epstein first. Now pause and think about that for a moment. Jeffrey Epstein did not formally work for the Gates Foundation. He wasn't on the International Peace Institute's board. He held no formal position within the polio program. And yet Epstein was sitting in the middle of a channel involving sensitive geopolitical intelligence tied to one of the world's most complex health programs. Now let's look at the timing. October 1st, 2013, IPI formally requests funding from Gates. October 23rd, 2013, the Gates Foundation signs a $2.5 million grant agreement. In between those two dates, Epstein sends instructions. Do not send anything else without letting me see it before it goes. That's not casual CC behaviour. That's someone asserting oversight. And this relationship continued. As late as January 2018, Epstein was brokering Davos access between Rod Larsen and Gates' inner circle, explicitly referencing IPI's polio work as the credential. So 5 years, that's not dinners, that's intermediation. In 2011, 2 years before the polio channel opened, JP Morgan executives were asking Jeffrey Epstein to help design a Gates-linked donor-advised fund. In those emails, Epstein wrote, "We should be ready with an offshore arm, especially for vaccines." He also acknowledged what he called the tension of making money in a charitable organisation, recommending that profit-generating parts be kept at arm's length. That language later appears inside a formal JP Morgan client draft known as Project Molecule, which outlined perpetual governance structures, offshore charitable tax entities, as in neutral jurisdictions, donor anonymity, vaccine procurement budgets, and funding for surveillance networks. This is where it becomes critical to explain something clearly. By 2017, in documented correspondence, pandemic was described as a strategic funding category, not an emergency, a funding category. In finance, that means it was treated as an asset class, something you build financial products around. At the same time, global markets were issuing pandemic catastrophe bonds. Here's how those work in simple terms. Investors buy bonds that pay high interest. As long as no qualifying pandemic is declared, those investors collect yields. If a pandemic is declared and meets the predefined criteria, the bond triggers investors to lose their principal, and that capital is released to response mechanisms. That doesn't prove wrongdoing, but it does mean pandemics had already been financially modelled. Coronavirus was explicitly listed as a covered peril in those bond documents. So when we see in a January 2017 text message from Epstein's phone in which an associate writes, "Just did pandemic simulation," while discussing placements into vaccine teams and reinsurance firms, we're not looking at coincidence, we're looking at alignment. Pandemic exited simultaneously as a simulation discipline, a donor-advised fund strategy, a reinsurance trigger event, and a vaccine development investment strategy years before COVID. Now let's go back to 2014. During the Ebola outbreak, IPI circulated a concept paper titled The Nexus Centre for Peace and Health, explicitly updated in light of Ebola. That language was clear. The world needs such a centre now more than ever. That paper was forwarded to Epstein. Around the same time, Epstein emailed Obama's White House counsel, saying, "If Ebola gets bad, bye-bye Senate, for sure." That shows disease severity being discussed in political terms. Meanwhile, scientists pitched Epstein on pre-symptomatic Ebola detection, which he forwarded to the Gates Foundation while discussing equity splits. That is dual-set technology, early detection and surveillance infrastructure. The documents don't prove whether any virus was intentionally released, but they do show this. Before COVID, a system already existed that merged private philanthropy, conflict zone intelligence, offshore structuring, pandemic financial instruments, surveillance funding, and global governance planning. And at the key junctions of those systems was Jeffrey Epstein. If the system had built-in safeguards, there would have been detection mechanisms. If it were transparent, the public would have known how those channels operated. Instead, Bill Gates has repeatedly said in public it was just a few dinners. So the question is, why did Bill Gates lie to the public? Why the cover-up? And how did Jeffrey Epstein, with no formal role, come to sit inside multi-operational channels tied to global health strategy, financial structuring, and geopolitical intelligence? That's what this series will examine. In part 2, we go line by line through Project Molecule and explain why pandemic preparedness became permanent financial structure. Follow me so you don't miss it. As this series continues, we're going to go into the key players, the links between Gates and Epstein's medical influence, investments into gene therapy, and how prominent, influential professors appear to have been compromised. So as the mainstream media won't cover these topics, it's up to us, we the people, to share this information. Please like, please comment, please save this and share this with as many people as you can.